Dungeon Reaper. A light novel by Bloodmoss. Chapter 7. Carnage and Combustion. Cain stood before the shimmering blue gate, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. Worry bubbled beneath the surface, but he shoved it down with a sharp breath. I'm not going to die. Worst case scenario? Maybe lose an arm or a leg, but I can deal with that. I'm one of Death's chosen, right? Stepping through, he braced for impact, fire, lightning, or whatever chaos he'd built up in his head. Instead, a warm summer breeze tickled his face. He blinked, surprised, as green pastures stretched out before him, rolling into the horizon. The hill in the distance caught his eye. It was large, brown, and moving? No, it wasn't moving, it just looked fuzzy. Weird. Shit, Lena muttered, breaking the silence. Hell yeah, Bria shouted, her expression the exact opposite of her sister. Fuck me, Penny added with a groan. Tara sighed, placing her hands on her hips. We've got ants. Cain blinked, confused. Ants? Penny shot him a sharp look, her tone incredulous. Have you read a training manual? You're supposed to be familiar with the known zones. This is a very well-documented one. Cain scratched the back of his neck, sheepish. My manuals are a bit out of date. Tara stepped in smoothly before Penny could escalate. One of the reasons I'm here, Penny. No worries. Good, Penny muttered, though her tone was less than enthusiastic. I almost forgot you were here. Ants give me the willies. This'll be my second run through this one. Second run? Dungeons repeat sometimes? Cain asked, his curiosity momentarily overriding his embarrassment. Tara clapped her hands together, her tone brisk. Tell you what, girls. How about you hang tight for a bit? Me and Grim Sleeper here will go handle the hard part, and then we can all go underground together. Sound good? Penny didn't hesitate, her gaze snapping back to Cain. It's your run, Ms. Windstorm. Personally, I'm absolutely fine with that. She turned to Cain, her tone sharpening. Not only will you be training on weaponry that looks like you've never held before, you'll also be sitting for dungeon guide tests for the next month. Minimum. Cain opened his mouth to protest, but Penny cut him off sharply, her voice rising. You're lucky I don't report you to Broad for an incomplete application to the guild. At best. Blatant falsification is also on the table. Tara stepped forward, her demeanor calm but firm. She could tell this was going poorly and felt she had better intercede. Shaniqua would not be happy if Cain got barred from guilds on his first day out. Ms. Hollow, this is a possible oversight from one of my acquaintances. You have my apologies and my assistance until we can get him up to speed. The entire group watched as the possibilities played across Penny's face, her mind clearly negotiating the idea of a Class C adventurer aiding her guild. After a long moment, her expression softened. You are generous with your time, Ms. Windstorm. That would be a great boon to our guild. You have a deal. The sisters exchanged relieved glances, nodding their agreement, while Cain shot Tara a grateful look. Bria perked up. Make sure you save the caverns for me. I've got something special for scenarios just like this. Tara perked up, thankful for a good turn of events for once, do tell. Bria shook her head. Nah, I'll save it for a surprise. It will be nice to impress you, and then you can go tell all these boys with the big mouths that the Jumper Sisters are more than just a nice pair of shields. Tara laughed out loud. Sounds like a plan. We will be a while, but we'll be back when the workers are cold. As they started walking toward the fuzzy, shifting hill, Cain fell in step with Tara. How many dungeon types were logged when you were studying the guides? Tara asked, her tone less biting now. About 70, I think, Cain replied. I never actually counted them. Tara chuckled. Now there are over 300, and they duplicate often. These days, finding a new one is rare. But if you do stumble into something unknown, you've got to register the entire run with Broad for documentation. No exceptions. Cain nodded, though his attention was drawn to the shifting hill. And this one? What's the deal with ants? Tara pointed toward the hill. It's like this. The Reapers see these dungeons as pocket spaces we access through the gates. They're not huge, some are a few miles wide, some as small as a single building. Ants, specifically, is about 2 miles across, but the underground caverns are what get people lost. If you keep walking in a straight line here, the space loops you back to where you started. Endless green pastures. Cain tilted his head. So, that hill is an anthill? Exactly, Tara said, her tone flat. A very large anthill. And the ants are the size of dogs. Hundreds, maybe even 1,000 of them. Cain's face paled. That's unpleasant. Tell me about it, Tara said with a sigh. Adventurers typically try to avoid killing everything. Swarming isn't fun. This expensive leather armor I loaned you. She tapped his chest. Won't last 10 seconds. These ants tear through plate mail like it's paper. Cain grimaced. Great. So what about us? You said that's what adventurers do. What's the Reaper plan? Tara smirked, tapping the hilt of one of her blades. Good question. Dungeons reset regardless of what happens inside. The creatures rebuild, the traps reset. It's like the whole thing gets rewound to its original state. But here's the catch, there's always a chance that every dungeon will contain the souls of fallen humans. That's why we have to search every corner every time. It doesn't matter if a Reaper cleared it out last month or if it wiped an entire team of adventurers. The possibility is always there. How do we know? Cain asked, his unease growing. We don't, Tara said cheerfully. Cain stopped in his tracks. But you said there are miles of caverns. Yes, that's exactly what I said. As if on cue, a rustling sound came from the tall grass to their right. Cain froze, his heart hammering. Tara didn't flinch. Here we go, she said, a gleam of excitement in her eyes. The grass parted, revealing a massive, sleek ant. Its mandibles clicked menacingly as it charged toward them. Watch and learn, Tara said, her voice low. She raised her hand, and the air around her seemed to hum with energy. A powerful gust of wind exploded outward, ripping through the grass and slamming into the charging ant like a battering ram. The creature skidded back several feet, its legs scrabbling against the ground in a desperate attempt to regain balance. Before it could recover, Tara was already moving. Her twin blades flashed in the sunlight, spinning in a mesmerizing blur as she closed the distance with terrifying speed. With a sharp, precise slash, her left blade severed the ant's front legs, sending it crashing to the ground. She followed up with a downward strike from her right blade, piercing the creature's thorax. The ant let out a shrill, chittering screech before collapsing in a twitching heap. Tara stood over it, her expression calm, as if dispatching a dog-sized insect was just another Tuesday. She flicked her blades clean with a quick motion and turned to Cain with a grin. See? Windstorm isn't just a nickname. She sheathed her blades, gesturing for him to follow. Come on, Flower. We've got a queen to find. I liked Grim Sleeper much better. Cain huffed. Tara crouched low in the grass, her twin blades shimmering faintly in the sunlight. She glanced over her shoulder at Cain, who stood a few feet behind her, scythe resting awkwardly against his shoulder. His expression was a mix of determination and unease, as if he couldn't decide whether he was ready or about to throw up. All right, Grim, Tara said, her tone light but firm. We're wiping out everything above ground. No stragglers. Think you can keep up? Cain forced a smirk, gripping the sword a little tighter. I'll do my best. Good. Stick close, don't get cocky, and for the love of death, don't get in my way. She didn't wait for a reply, darting forward in a blur of motion. The fight began immediately. Ants poured out of the hill in waves, their dog-sized bodies clicking and hissing as they charged. Tara was a whirlwind among them, her movements so fluid and precise it was almost mesmerizing. She darted around the first ant, a shimmering blur as she activated Windwalk. In an instant, she was behind it, her blades flashing in quick succession. The creature collapsed in a heap before it even realized what had hit it. Cain hesitated, watching her work. Wow, he muttered, before an ant lunged at him from the side. Focus, Grim. Tara's shout snapped him out of his awe. Cain raised scythe, just in time to block the charging ant, the impact nearly knocking him off his feet. With a grunt, he swung the weapon in a wide arc, the blade carving through the creature's body. It crumpled to the ground, twitching. Nearby, Tara flicked her wrist, sending a wind blast barreling into a group of ants. The gust slammed into them like a wrecking ball, scattering their bodies across the battlefield. She wasted no time following up, her blades slicing through the survivors with terrifying efficiency. "Keep moving," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let them box us in." Cain nodded, trying to find his rhythm. He spotted another ant charging straight for him, its mandibles snapping hungrily. His heart raced as he stretched out his hand, summoning his spirit chain. The ethereal chain shot forward, wrapping around the creature's legs and yanking it off balance. "Yes," he shouted, grinning at his small victory. But his triumph was short-lived. Another ant leaped at him from the side, its shadow looming large as it descended. Panic flared in his chest as he instinctively activated ethereal transference. His body flickered, becoming translucent, and the ant passed harmlessly through him, crashing into the ground behind him. "I did it!" Cain yelled, his voice filled with glee. "Watch your six, idiot!" Tara's warning came too late. Another ant lunged at him, its mandibles wide. Before it could reach him, Tara appeared out of nowhere, her windwalk propelling her forward in a blur. Her blades flashed, slicing cleanly through the ant and sending it tumbling to the ground. She turned to Cain, her eyes blazing. "You want to survive? Stop celebrating every little win and keep your head in the game." Cain gulped, nodding quickly. "Got it. No more celebrating." "Good." Tara didn't wait for him to recover, diving back into the fray. The ground became a battlefield of twitching legs and shattered exoskeletons as Tara's speed and precision dismantled the swarm. Cain did his best to keep up, his sword swinging awkwardly but effectively, each successful strike boosting his shaky confidence. "How many of these things are there?" Cain shouted as another wave poured out of the hill. "Enough to make this fun." Tara replied with a grin, slicing through two ants in one fluid motion. Cain wasn't sure he'd call this fun, but watching Tara work? That was something else entirely. Tara sat cross-legged on the ground, her twin blades resting beside her as she closed her eyes and began to meditate. A faint breeze stirred the air around her, calming and rhythmic. Cain leaned against a nearby boulder, his sword resting across his lap. The word scythe engraved on its blade gleamed faintly in the sunlight. "That was," Cain began, searching for the right words. "Incredible. Watching you fight, it was like watching a storm tear through those ants. You didn't just fight them. You owned them." Tara opened one eye, her lips quirking into a small smile. "Flattery will get you nowhere, Grim." "I'm serious," Cain said, sitting up straighter. "The way you move, the way you handle those blades, it's insane. You're like an artist, but instead of a paintbrush, you've got, swords. Deadly, terrifying swords." Tara chuckled softly. "Well, I've had a little practice." She closed her eye again, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. A few feet away, Penny, Bria, and Lena watched the exchange with varying levels of annoyance. "I can't believe we had to sit here while all that was going on," Bria muttered, gesturing toward the battlefield in the distance. Penny shrugged. "It wasn't my idea. But don't worry, you'll get your chance." Lena perked up. "Really?" Penny smirked, crossing her arms. "Oh, absolutely. Since Ms. Windstorm so graciously offered to assist us for the next month, I'll be doubling our dungeon runs. DRB will have no complaints about it either, not with a Class C helping out in an E-Class dungeon. This is like hitting the jackpot." Bria's excitement dimmed slightly. "Double the runs? That sounds exhausting." "You'll survive," Penny replied with a grin. "And it'll be worth it. Having a C-Class adventure on hand is ridiculously rare for a dungeon like this. We'll be swimming in resources. Honestly, I'm almost willing to forgive Grimm's lack of knowledge, because this more than makes up for it." Cain shot her a glance, but wisely said nothing. Inside he was ecstatic that Penny just referred to him as Grim. He sincerely hoped that one sticks. He will have to thank Tara for that big time. As they made their way toward the towering anthill, the group passed through the aftermath of Tara's earlier rampage. The carnage was staggering. Ant bodies were strewn across the battlefield, some cleaved cleanly in two, others shattered or crumpled as if they'd been caught in a hurricane. "Wow," Lena said, her voice hushed. "She did all this?" "Looks like it," Bria added, her tone filled with awe. Cain couldn't help but chime in. "I was there too, you know." Bria glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, how many did you take down?" Cain hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "At least 2. The girls burst into laughter, their giggles echoing across the battlefield. Even Penny cracked a smirk. 2, Bria repeated, shaking her head. "Well, don't spend that kill count all in one place, Grim Sleeper." Tara glanced back. He was there for moral support, and he did fetch me a water. So there's that. Cain grumbled under his breath, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. He couldn't deny it, they weren't wrong. When they reached the base of the hill, Bria stepped forward, squatting near the dark cave-like entrance. Her expression shifted, growing focused as she stretched out her hands. "What are you doing?" Cain asked, leaning closer. "Just watch," Penny said, a knowing grin on her face. A faint green glow began to emanate from Bria's palms, and within moments, a thick fog began to pour from her hands, spilling into the tunnel. The air grew heavy with an acrid, almost metallic scent as the fog coiled and twisted, sinking deeper into the hill. "Stay out of the fog," Bria muttered, her voice strained. "It's not healthy." Cain took a step back, his eyes wide. "Noted." Tara stood protectively nearby, her blades at the ready as she scanned the horizon for any approaching threats. Minutes passed, and Bria's shoulders began to sag, sweat forming on her brow. Lena stepped closer, worry etched across her face. "Bria, you're pushing yourself too hard. Stop before you burn out." "I'm fine," Bria snapped, though her voice was weaker now. "Almost there." Finally, she stopped, rising unsteadily to her feet. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and turned to the group with a tired grin. "Okay, everyone, run." Tara didn't hesitate, grabbing Cain by the arm and pulling him into a sprint. The group scattered, not waiting to see what would happen next. They were 100 yards away when Bria stopped abruptly, turning back to face the hill. With a dramatic clap of her hands, a green flaming arrow shot from her palms, streaking toward the cave entrance. The arrow struck the lingering fog, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the ground erupted in a deafening explosion. A massive plume of green fire burst from the hill, sending dirt and debris flying in every direction. The earth trembled beneath their feet as the shockwave rolled over them. Cain stumbled but managed to stay upright, his mouth hanging open as he took in the destruction. That was insane. Tara walked over to Bria, a wide grin on her face. "You really are much more than just a nice pair of shields, aren't you?" Bria shrugged and smiled, still catching her breath, leaning on her sister. "We have our moments."